They said this place had been abandoned for over 10 years. And yet inside, 6 women and 1 warrior were waiting, as if they'd known he was coming. And that's when the nightmare began for him. Welcome to Wild West storytelling. Let's begin. The setting sun poured a blaze of gold over the prairie, staining the distant mountains in a deep crimson. Elias Ward pulled on the reins, slowing his horse as the shadow of a weathered stable loomed ahead. The lawyer in town had been clear this ranch had been abandoned for over a decade. But as Elias drew near, the dry wind across the plain couldn't hide another sound. The sharp, metallic clank of iron against wood, steady, urgent, like chains rubbing under strain. He pushed the stable door open, the hinges screaming. Dry straw swirled in the narrow beam of light cutting through a hole in the roof. And there, hanging by both wrists, was a native warrior. The man was tall, his arms roped with muscle, bare chest streaked with blood and sweat. Black hair was tied back high, strands falling loose across a chiseled face. Even strung up, his eyes were cold and unyielding, locked on Elias as if he'd known all along this meeting would happen. In the center of his chest, a dagger was buried deep, pinning something in place. Elias stepped closer. It was a photograph of himself, freshly taken, the ink not yet faded. The warrior tilted his head slightly, breath ragged, and spoke in a low, gravelly voice. "You came too late. I'm truly grateful for the chance to share this moment with you tonight. Let us know where you're listening from and what you're doing right now. I only hope that, wherever you are safe, and you are at peace." Elias hadn't even had time to react when a faint sound stirred from the far corner of the stable. Shapes began to emerge through the dusty haze. 6 women stepped forward, their movements calm, but their eyes as sharp as drawn blades. Leading them was an older woman, perhaps 60, with long silver hair neatly braided and steel-gray eyes that carried the weight of decades. She stopped a few paces from Elias, her gaze shifting between him and the suspended warrior, as though weighing something. "You're late," she said, not quite a rebuke, but heavy enough to thicken the air. Elias frowned. "I only got here today. This ranch, I just inherited it." The old woman's lips curved faintly. "We know. And this man," she glanced toward the warrior, "knows as well." A younger woman with curly red hair stepped forward, gripping a photograph tightly in her hand. Elias froze for a moment. It was another picture of him, taken in the exact same style as the one pinned to the native warrior's chest. "Strange," she said slowly. "We've never met you, yet here we have these pictures." Elias let his eyes sweep the stable. For a place said to be abandoned for over a decade, it was suspiciously clean, fresh straw on the floor, hinges oiled, tools in place. This wasn't the picture of neglect. "What's going on here?" he asked, his voice dropping lower. The old woman didn't answer right away. Instead, she moved to the warrior and sliced through his bindings with a single clean motion. He dropped to one knee, then rose immediately to his full height. His gaze locked on Elias, as if sizing up the stakes of a gamble. "I am Dakota," he said, his voice low and resonant, carrying an unfamiliar cadence from far-off lands. "Your uncle owed me a promise." Elias stiffened. "My uncle's been dead for months." Dakota pointed toward the wall at the back of the stable. Elias turned and saw faint carvings, half hidden under dust. When he brushed them clean, words emerged, his own name, etched deep into the wood, alongside a date, more than 15 years old. "Your uncle said," Dakota paused, his eyes momentarily clouded with memory, "when the sun rises behind that hill in the 15th winter, you will return. And when that day comes, all unfinished business will be settled." Elias glanced around 6 women, a native warrior, strange photographs, and an old promise he'd never heard of. It all felt like a chess game he hadn't realized he was playing, with himself as the key piece. The silver-haired woman stepped forward, placing her calloused hand on the stable door. "You can leave today, walk away from all of this. But if you stay," her gaze locked with his, "you will carry what your uncle left behind. And trust me, it's not land or money." Outside, the evening wind picked up, carrying with it the scent of dust and a faint trace of smoke. Elias didn't know why, but in that moment, he knew he had stepped into something from which there was no turning back. Elias hadn't had time to ask more when the silver-haired woman turned and motioned for the others to follow. The 6 women moved in a single file, silent, as if they'd rehearsed this scene many times before. Dakota, still standing in the shadows, slowly bent to pick up the dagger from the floor, the steel flashing briefly in the fading light. They led Elias across the yard toward the main house. The wooden door swung open, the hinges groaning like a greeting from the past. Inside, it was warmer than he expected. The fireplace glowed red, the scent of burning wood mingling with the smell of fresh cornbread. But what stopped Elias in his tracks was the far wall. Rows of framed photographs lined it from floor to ceiling. Pictures of him at different ages. A touzle-haired boy holding a wooden horse, a teenager leaning against a fence, a man in military uniform, and even photographs he had never taken, in places he had never been. "How did you get these?" Elias asked, his voice low but taut. The old woman sat in a wooden chair near the fire, her eyes never leaving him. "We didn't," she said. "Your uncle left them." Dakota leaned against a support beam, his eyes reading every flicker of expression on Elias's face. "He once told me, memories can be stolen, but traces, they never fade." A dark-haired woman with work-roughened hands spoke up. "Your uncle promised that when you returned you'd finish what he could not. He said, you would protect us." Elias stepped back half a pace. "I know nothing about that promise. I came here for an inheritance, that's all." The old woman reached under the table and lifted a small wooden chest, bound with an iron chain. She set it down in front of him. "Inside is your answer. But once you open it, you can never go back to being an outsider." Elias stared at the weathered lock, feeling as if the whole room was holding its breath for his decision. Outside, the wind hissed through the cracks in the door, carrying with it a faint metallic clink from somewhere far off. Dakota pushed away from the beam and stepped closer. "If you open it, remember every enemy your uncle had will see you as part of this story. And they will come." Elias didn't reply. His eyes traveled over the 6 women, different ages, different builds, but all wearing the same look of quiet expectation. The native warrior stood silent, his gaze unyielding. In the corner of the room, a curtain shifted slightly, revealing a narrow window. Outside, silhouetted against the dusk, a lone rider sat motionless atop the ridge, still as stone. Dakota glanced toward it, his voice dropping. "They've already caught the scent." The rider on the ridge didn't move, letting his horse stand with its head turned toward the house. The fading light turned him into a dark silhouette cut against the blood-red sky. Elias kept his eyes on the window. "Who is that?" he asked. No one answered right away. The silver-haired woman whom Dakota had called Maeve slowly rose, stepped over, and drew the curtain shut. "They've been watching this place for a long time," she said. "But today is the first time they've seen you." Dakota tilted his head slightly, his gaze sharp as if measuring the distance to the figure on the hill. "They'll come," he said. "Maybe not tonight, but soon." A young woman with blonde hair tied back spoke from the kitchen corner. "Maybe they think you've brought whatever's inside that chest." Elias glanced down at the wooden chest still sitting on the table. "This thing, what exactly is it?" Maeve sighed and sat back down, her hands clasping together. "It's what your uncle promised to keep safe for us, and promised to pass on to you at the right time. It could save lives, or kill every one of us." The fireplace popped softly. In the warm orange glow, every face around the table revealed faint scars and deep lines. These weren't strangers who had met by chance, they shared the same past. Elias sat opposite Maeve, his voice low. "And Dakota? Why was he hanging in the barn?" Dakota didn't blink. "A warning. Someone wanted me dead before I could tell you the truth." Elias frowned. "Who?" The native warrior stepped closer to the fire, its glow flickering in the dark depths of his eyes. "The men who killed their husbands," he said, nodding toward the 6 women, "and are trying to bury that story forever." The air in the room seemed to tighten. Elias looked from face to face, but no one denied it. Maeve only said, "That's not a story for your first night here." The sound of hoofbeats faded down the ridge, but from behind the house came the heavy clatter of metal hitting the ground. Dakota turned, one hand settling on the hilt of his broad knife. A deep, gravelly male voice called in from the yard. "We know there's someone new here. Best come out and say hello, before we have to come in ourselves." Maeve gripped the arm of her chair. "They never come at this hour." "Something's changed." Elias stood, sensing every eye in the room waiting to see what he would do. Outside, 5 mounted riders now stood in the rising moonlight, their horses in a line, guns hanging low at their sides. Dakota stepped close to Elias, his voice rumbling like stone rolling downhill. "You want to know what you've inherited? This is only the beginning. I'm grateful to have you here. The narrator's voice softens. If this story brings back memories of the old days of red dust afternoons and hoofbeats echoing in your chest, then subscribe to my channel. So every day, we can sit together, and I'll tell you another Wild West story. The 5 riders reined in their horses in the middle of the yard, silver moonlight glinting off the dust swirling beneath iron hooves. The one in the center was tall and broad-shouldered, his dark leather coat coated in the grit of long roads. His eyes swept over the windows, as if measuring every shadow inside. "We've got business with this house," he said, his voice deep and steady, the sound of a man long used to giving orders. "Heard it's got a new owner now." Elias stood in the doorway, making no move to step outside. "If you've got something to say, come back in the morning." A harsh, rasping laugh came from the rider on the left, younger, but no less mean. "We didn't come here to ask permission." Dakota stepped up beside Elias, speaking low enough for only him to hear. "Don't let them smell fear. Dogs can always scent it." The red-haired woman Clara gripped an old Winchester, keeping herself hidden behind the doorframe. The others said nothing, their eyes drawn tight like bowstrings. The leader tilted his chin toward the eaves. "There's something here that belongs to us. Or at least, something we've got the right to take back." Elias frowned. "I've no idea what you're talking about." The man's mouth curled in a thin smile. "Funny thing, your uncle knew well enough, and it seems you're just dumb enough to step into his boots." Dakota's grip on his knife tightened. "That man protected it with his life, and if you want it, you'll pay the same price." The younger rider spat into the dirt, sneering. "You're no different than that old fool, a pack of dead men, hiding in a rotting shack." Elias never took his eyes off the leader. "If that's how it is, why don't you come and take it?" For a moment, there was silence. Then the man's thin smile flattened into a cold line. "Because we know what's inside, and who's in there. No one stays alive and keeps this secret forever. You've got 3 days to think. Hand it over, or we'll take it along with every last body inside." He jerked the reins, turning his horse. The other 4 followed, iron hooves drumming against the hard earth, their sound fading into the night. The door closed, but the silence inside didn't ease. Maeve stood still for a long moment before finally looking at Elias. "Now you see, don't you? The reason we're here, and the reason they want us gone." Elias glanced at Dakota, then down at the wooden chest still sitting on the table. Suddenly, it wasn't just an object anymore, it was the heart of a hunt, years in the making. And now, it had pulled him straight into its center. The fire cracked in the hearth, casting tense, flickering shadows across the wall. No one spoke until Dakota set the dagger down on the table, the weight of steel against wood ringing heavy in the air. "They know about what happened that year," he said, eyes locked on Elias. Maeve gave a slight shake of her head. "Not tonight." "Yes," Dakota cut in. "If he's going to stay, he needs to know." Elias glanced around the room. "What happened? How was my uncle involved?" Maeve drew a deep breath, her hands tightening together until the knuckles turned white. 15 years ago there was a hunt, not for gold, but for people. Clara stepped forward, her voice as cold as steel. 7 men. Men who were supposed to protect their families betrayed us, sold us, and nearly killed us. They were our husbands and our cruelest enemies. Elias went still. The words fell slowly, heavy as stones dropping into a deep well. Dakota continued. "Your uncle found them, the survivors, wandering along the riverbank, with nowhere left to go. He knew that if they went back, their husbands would either kill them or sell them again." Maeve lowered her gaze. "We didn't want to go back. We wanted to disappear. And your uncle," Clara cut in, "helped us do that, by making the whole town believe we were dead." A chill crawled up Elias's spine. "Dead? How?" Dakota's eyes didn't waver. "A fire. A wooden house on the edge of town. No one ever found whole bodies." Maeve lifted her head, her gaze a mix of pride and old ghosts. "They blamed a tipped-over oil lamp, but only we and your uncle knew. It wasn't an accident." Elias slowly pushed his chair back, as if trying to create space. "You killed them?" The silence stretched. Then Clara's voice came, rough and steady. "We chose to live." The fire popped, lighting every hard line in their faces. Elias realized these weren't helpless victims. They were people who had crossed a line to survive. Dakota leaned against the wall. "And now, the ones who profited from their deaths have found this place. They want what's in that chest, the proof, and the only shield any of us have left." Elias looked down at the wooden chest. The old lock was worn, but it felt as though inside was a road he could never turn back from. Outside, the night wind whistled through the cracks in the door. Somewhere out there, the sound of hooves returned slow, steady, like a predator closing in on its prey. The pounding of hooves ripped through the night, no longer slow and measured. The windows quivered with each strike against the hard, dry ground. Maeve laid a hand on Elias's shoulder. "They're not waiting for morning." Clara yanked open the cupboard beside the stove, pulling out a Winchester and an old wooden box of cartridges. The other women armed themselves with whatever they could find: knives, revolvers, even a heavy iron pestle. Dakota strapped a bandolier tight across his chest, eyes locked on the darkness beyond the window. "How many?" Elias asked. Dakota peered through a slit in the curtain. "More than last time. At least 6. Outside, the horsemen had formed a wide arc, cutting off the only way in or out of the ranch. The leader from before spurred his horse forward, his voice booming through the night. "Enough games. Hand it over, and we'll leave. Or we come in and take it." Maeve took a step toward the door, but Dakota stopped her. "Number, this is our fight." Elias felt every eye in the room turn to him. He clenched his fists. "If I give it to you, this ends here?" The leader let out a rough, joyless laugh. "Maybe. Or it just starts something worse." Dakota drew his dagger, stepping close to the door. "We don't take a rattlesnake at its word." A gunshot cracked without warning, the bullet splintering the wooden post beside the door frame. Clara dropped to one knee by the window and fired back. A shout rang out, followed by the wild whinny of a horse from the outer ring. "They're spreading out," Maeve called. Elias lunged to the chest, gripping the lock. Part of him wanted to open it right then, hand it over, and be done. But the look in Dakota's eyes, and in the faces of these women, that mix of hope and defiance, held his hand in place. A shadow moved toward the window. Dakota's knife flashed through the gap, striking true. A dry, ragged groan followed. Clara yanked the body back and slammed the shutters closed. From the yard, the leader roared, "You just signed your own death warrant." The pounding of hooves closed in, gunfire erupting in chaotic bursts. The acrid stench of powder filled the room. Elias grabbed the Winchester from Clara's hands as she reloaded. He pressed the stock to his shoulder, aiming toward the door, waiting for the first dark shape to burst into his sights. Dakota stood on the other side, dagger in one hand, revolver in the other. "Now you choose," he said over the gunfire. "Walk away now, or stay and become part of this." Elias drew a deep breath and pulled the trigger. His first shot blasted the man breaking through the door clean off his feet. The decision was made, and there was no turning back. Gunsmoke thickened the air inside the house. The splintering of wood, the ripping crack of bullets, the panicked shrieks of horses in the yard. It was a storm of chaos. Dakota pressed his back to the wall, motioning Elias toward the wooden chest. "This is the key," Maeve said firmly. "They won't stop until they have it." Elias crouched, his hand on the lock. Through the din, it struck him if the chest stayed here, they'd tear the place apart to get it. But if he turned it into bait, he looked over his shoulder, eyes meeting Dakota's. "I need you to draw them out." Dakota didn't ask questions, just gave a short nod. He burst out the back door, firing shots, and the shouts outside immediately shifted direction. 3 riders broke from the line to chase him. Elias popped the lock and pulled out a heavy bundle wrapped in cloth. He swaddled it in an old blanket, slipped in a few lengths of scrap iron to keep the weight, then stuffed it into a worn leather sack. Stepping onto the front porch, he made sure it was square in the leader's line of sight. "You want it?" Elias shouted. "Then come and take it." The man spurred forward, 2 more at his heels. But as he reached for the bag, Elias kicked loose a rope catch. The front awning collapsed in one violent sweep, boards and chains slamming horse and riders to the dirt. From inside, Clara fired twice, forcing them down so Dakota could lunge in and wrench the leader's arms behind his back. The rest of the gang saw their boss taken and broke off, galloping into the distance, leaving the yard heavy with dust and silence. Dakota dragged the leader up onto the porch, blood trickling from his temple. "They'll be back," Elias said, "unless we give them a reason to disappear for good." Maeve handed him a small leather pouch this time, the real thing. Inside were old documents, territorial seals, and a map marking the site of a buried cache. "This," she said, "will tell anyone they're not the hunters, but the hunted." The next day, Elias rode into town, delivering the pouch to the old lawyer and sending a copy to the federal marshal's office. The message would make the rest of them back off or face a deeper investigation. That evening, Elias returned to the ranch. Dakota stood at the fence, eyes on the open prairie. 6 women watched from the porch, their expressions lighter, though still edged with caution. Maeve stepped down to meet him. Your uncle kept his promise to us. Now, you've done the same. Elias removed his hat. Glancing over the dry land he now knew he'd never walk away from. From this day on, this is my home. And anyone under this roof is family. The sun dipped low, painting the sky in gold, draping them in one of those rare, peaceful moments the West allowed. But in every eye there still burned the ember of a fire ready to flare again, should that promise be tested. Some promises aren't written down, and no one swears them before a witness, but they follow you all your life. Out here, land can change hands, guns can change owners. But honor? You only get one chance to keep it. Elias didn't choose the easy path. He chose to stay, to stand with those who'd once been cast aside, and maybe that's what turns a stretch of wild ground into a home, and strangers into family. Because in this land of wind and dust, the most valuable thing isn't gold, and it isn't a gun, it's knowing who will stand beside you when the night falls. Once again, it's been an honor to share this story with you. Tell me what you think in the comments below. Type 1 if you enjoyed it, and don't forget to subscribe for more gripping tales of the Wild West.